world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stepanie
and Maren,
and this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen.
Welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast and happy 2024. I know we're just coming into a new year. It kind of feels like a new beginning in many ways. I feel the whole month of January sometimes it's kind of a way to reset and recreate ourselves. And there's a great wave of possibilities. So even if you don't believe in setting New Year's resolutions or goal setting or planning, there is something about renewing your commitment to yourself, to others. And I was recently reflecting on that. Both Maren and I were around, what happens when we make mistakes? When we don't really reach the goal that we want, or, how are we with ourselves and how are we with each other? And this theme of our call today, or our podcast today, is blame and shame.
I love that, especially as we're, mid-January, and this is about the time that people start to feel that shame of, oh, I set a New Year's resolution and I didn't even last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. Or
I've already
a
fell
week.
off the bandwagon.
Right? I said I was going to eat what such and such. I said I was going to read so many books. I said I was going to, whatever I said I was going to. And the momentum is starting to lag, and we get into either a blame or a shame game of, I didn't do it well enough, I'm not good enough, I'm like all the inner chatter, or, well, it's because this person did that, or because that situation happened, or all of the things. So this is a perfect conversation for right now in our lives.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting article I was reading, John Bradshaw's, around healing the shame that binds you. And he talks about kind of the 7 rules that will maintain shame. And, I kind of want to take each one of them because I think there's a more beautiful way of looking at these too. And to be honest with you, it's a great way to really recognize the patterns in your life so that we can find a new way of kindness and gentleness with ourselves that will make space for us to give the energy to actually make the change happen.
Right. So what I'm hearing is, like, we set the New Year's resolutions, we set our goals
Yeah.
to achieve a thing, and we get disappointed with ourselves because we didn't get towards that thing.
Right.
And yet it's really about the change that happens in us.
Isn't it though? Which
So
we're not told to really
we're
look
not
at.
we're not
We
told
keep
to
looking at the outer manifestation of something. It's like, well, you still
Right.
but you're still not successful, Stepanie. Like, you still haven't, lost the weight, or you still haven't achieved this kind of excellence, and we forget to look inside to say, well, wait a minute, am I the same as I was last year at this time? Have I had some sort of evolution? Have I had some sort of insight and awareness? And I really hope we all can look at that to say, yeah, actually I have changed. Well, then you are growing. You are doing enough. You're doing great.
And one of the things I notice is that oftentimes for myself, when I listen to the shame voice or I blame outside myself, I don't get that growth. Then
Yeah,
I am
right.
the same, right?
It
Then
thwarts the evolution. It
it
thwarts the
does.
growth.
Because then I'm like, I get into this rebellion around the goal. Well, fuck that. I didn't even want to do it anyway. Or the resignation of, like, oh, I can't, poor me, right? So
That's
we've
right.
talked about that with the rebellious, the teenager inside of us. And then I end up in that mode.
Mhm.
And I haven't grown because I'm still the rebellious teenager, or, in that old way of doing things. So when you're talking about that there is a higher way, what it gives us is not just a way to then get back, I guess, get back on the bandwagon, quote unquote, of
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
getting back into our flow towards whatever goal we had. Maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about realizing that there was something deeper behind that goal that I really wanted, which was my internal change. And that's what it makes space for, is that internal, like I can be a different person, and then that person can more easily maybe attain that goal.
Well, we can even ask, like, who is looking at that? Like, when
Mm.
I say who, and you could say, "Well, I'm looking at it, Stephanie. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean?" But it's like, if we can have an awareness of, like, what I said this earlier. I said, there's an old saying of, like, "Who are you when no one's looking?" How do
Mm.
you act? How do you behave? What do you say to yourself? How do you treat yourself? What actions are you taking or not taking? And that there's a wonderful little Sufi tale that I read sometimes in my yin yoga, and it talks about a great master that comes in, and he's basically saying to his disciples, his group of those of his students that he's teaching, he's like, "Look, I'm having a real hard time. I haven't got a lot of money, haven't got a lot of food to eat, and I really am asking for your help. Will you go out and steal from the neighborhoods and the neighbors, and steal me money, steal me food, and I'm a good teacher, so you should do this for me." You know? And everyone in his disciples were kind of saying, "Oh, yes, yes, we'll help you. Yes, how can we serve you, master?" And but there was this one student that was like holding his head kind of in shame. He's like, I just don't feel good." He didn't say anything. And as these young students were getting ready to go out and doing this, the master said, "But I want to make sure that no one can see you steal. No one can see you, taking advantage of. You have to do it where no one's looking."
Mm.
And the young student who had was holding his head down sheepishly said, "But wait a minute, that's impossible." And the master said, "What do you mean? Why are you being so disobedient to me?" You know? "Well, it's impossible." He said, "Well, tell me more why it's impossible." He said, "Because everywhere I go, I am always watching myself. So I
Mm.
can't not see myself. I cannot unsee it. Wherever I go, there I am, kind of thing."
Right.
And all of a sudden in that moment in the story, it says, all the other students were like aghast, going, "Oh my gosh, the master was trying to teach us a lesson and we just messed up. We just made a mistake. Oops." And I think of that. It's like, we can, when we make a mistake, we can either go into shame or we can ask another question, or
Mm.
we can stop and say, "Wait a minute, something feels off. I want to be," and instead of making the other person right or wrong, or yourself right or wrong, what who do you need to become to really be present to not knowing, to being in that middle ground, in that middle place of just inquiry and love? Because
Mm.
without love, you will shame yourself. Because
Yeah.
shame is what we do to ourselves, and blame is what we do to others, whether it's another person or whether it's, you know, a system or something like that. So,
And one of the most interesting things for me about that particular relationship of shame and blame is that if I internalize the shame, I will then turn around and blame. I will try and get somebody else to feel that shame too.
the old misery likes company.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So just recently, I had an experience where um, a teacher of mine, somebody that I really respect, I did something that they thought was an affront to them. And I'm really grateful that this person called me on it and said, "Hey, what was going on here?" And I wasn't able in that moment to just answer and be really clear of like, wow, that I didn't do that at all. Wait, that was a misunderstanding. I I went into shame. And so I didn't want to pass it along. aware enough to know I didn't want to pass it along. I didn't want to keep staying in it for myself, and I also didn't want to pass it along to anybody else. So I took some time and I asked some of those questions that you were talking about of, it's like, what is really going on here? Did I do something wrong? Did I? And I got really clear that it was it was not, I did not do something wrong. And, one of the things that we've talked many times on this podcast about is the Rumi quote, beyond right and wrong, there is a field and I will meet you there.
Mhm.
And I felt like I got to that place in myself. So then I was able to then, turn around and talk to my teacher, and we got to a really good place together because of that. I know when I've done this type of thing in the past with like either students of mine or in with my team, when you don't have that process, when you're not able to go inside and actually find find where that little shame booger lives, um it does get passed on. The misery loves company. It's like a meme, right? Pass that booger along, here, send it this way, send it that way.
Exactly. It's like the hot potato. Ooh, it's hot. I want to get rid of it as fast
Right.
as I can. But what we do is we just, magnify it, intensify it, and we throw it with more energy to another person, or we take it on ourselves and we completely go inward and downward, really. And what I mean by downward, we go into the I'm bad or they're bad, or I'm wrong or they're wrong, or we just kind of get in this siphon of negativity,
Mm.
and it creates the word depression, deep pressed ions. We actually squash our light. Instead of saying, like just being, I think there's a real power in staying in between the not, like staying with the not knowing, totally staying with the knowing, being present from a different place, like that example of that story of the young student that says, but wherever I go, there I am kind of idea. And that wherever I am, I'm watching. Well, someone is watching, and can I can I see this from a different perspective? Can I presence this from a different place, from a loving universe? We've talked about that many times too, that, Einstein would say, if you believe that there's a loving universe or an unfriendly universe, you're going to have a different reaction or response, essentially. And how do you build a practice or a way of being that you start to presence the loving universe is learning how to really know what would that mean to you? Like,
Mm.
how do I act when I believe I'm a part of a fear-based universe? I'm going to react. It's gonna create a lot of tension in my body and in my mind, and I'm gonna probably say and do things I really regret. Versus if I believe that it's a loving universe, I it gives me some space to really slow down and choose. It's not easy. I'm not saying that it's an easier place to believe, and I'm not saying it's blind faith that everything is all rosy and fluffy bunny stuff. It's an actual it's an actual practice and learning within yourself.
I think that's so key because if I had in that moment felt like I lived in a friendly universe,
Mhm.
there wouldn't have been shame. So it's almost like the shame was a flag for me of like, hey, Maren, this is still one of the places that you don't believe that like you're supported and that
Mhm.
all is well and that the universe is a good place. So you're gonna be like, oh, oops, right.
Yeah.
And we have another teacher, Roger James Hamilton, and I've been in his presence when something has gone wrong. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch because he, I think, really embodies, for me anyway, of somebody who truly believes that he lives in a friendly universe.
Mhm.
Because when I've been in his presence and just like, the shit goes sideways, he just is like, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay. So, it's like, oh, that happened. Why did that happen? And he gets curious and he digs in and there's not, what did you do? What's the problem with what problem? Like there's no pointing fingers. It just is, it's really a lovely thing. And that's my ideal that I strive to. So I'm really glad that I was given the opportunity to see this
Yeah.
sliver of life where I still don't necessarily believe that I'm supported.
And I like, what you're saying is that it is a practice to feel that you are supportive, to really start to practice that, to presence that. And we cannot be that for someone else unless we are first being it for ourselves. There's a
Mm.
great show on Hulu or Disney, um, which is called The Bear. And there's a scene in the second season where he uses the sign language of I'm sorry, which is a f kind of a fist and rubbing one's heart with a thumb up. And one of his he's a chef, he's a really accomplished chef, and he kind of ends up well, he doesn't kind of end it, he does, he ends up back in Chicago taking over his brother's business who has passed away, who's committed suicide, and he's left with a very dysfunctional team and a very dysfunctional time during COVID where there's not a lot of money, and he's having to really work with a lot of shame and a lot of blame around things. And he has some staff that he's been hard with and has kind of reacted out with around making mistakes. And then one of his team members says, "Look, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It won't happen again." And I think we kind of think that it's like, oh, that won't ever happen again, which is kind of really ridiculous to set ourselves up with that. And one of the things that the bearer says to his staff, he's like, "Yes, it will. And it's okay."
Mm.
And but he wouldn't be able to do that unless he was practicing that himself.
Right.
Of how are you practicing, you all out there listening, how are you practicing not shaming yourself or blaming yourself for something? And what is the most kind way of thinking, being with yourself so that you can then make space for another?
I I do love that show, and for any of for all of our soulful leaders out there, it's a beautiful lesson in leadership. Um, Evolution of
Mm.
leadership is what I saw in the bear. So we do highly recommend that. And what you're pointing at is so true. We are going to continue to make mistakes. So do we want to look at it of constantly saying, "Oh, I won't do that again. I won't do that again. I won't do that again." Yeah,
Mm.
you will.
It may not
So,
look exactly the same, but you'll probably have another creative way of making that mistake.
right. And
you
sometimes
know,
it'll look exactly the same.
Oh my gosh, again and again and again, right?
Right?
Like, it takes time. I think there's something that's really sad that I see sometimes people saying it's like, "Well, if you're really sorry, you won't make that same mistake again." And it's
Mm,
like, I don't think that's true. I think if you're really sorry, you're going to continue to keep practicing becoming aware and looking at what you're making a mistake. And you're also going to be practicing not beating yourself up about it and not
right.
blaming someone else for it either. You're going to keep working and you're going to ask for help. I think that's one of the biggest things right there is to say, can you help me see something that I'm not seeing? And sometimes people can't, if they're also caught in the shame blame thing, then they're not going to be able to see it either. They feel it or they know it, something's off. And that's where sometimes we do need someone else. This is why we need a community, why
Mm,
we need each other so that we can see each other's blind spots and help guide. And if we can stay open rather than defensive of like, why are you blaming me? You're not really seeing the whole all of me. Or if we can let that go, like you said, like Rumi, beyond right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. It's so beautiful. Can we meet each other at that presencing, that curiosity of like watching yourself go by and really looking at it from a loving universe, not from a harsh, beat
right.
yourself up, punishing that you should never make another mistake. You're trying to control your behavior. You're going to make mistakes again and again and again and again. So, what would be your practice of loving kindness toward yourself when you do make a mistake so that you can learn and grow through love and kindness?
And I would say for our leaders, the reason that is so important, and we're talking about doing it for ourselves, is because what Stephanie just said is you can't do it for another unless you're doing it for yourself. And so it would seem like, well, yeah, well, why aren't they talking about we need to be able to do that with our team? You know what you do? And it does start with you. And the thing that I'll say is, if you're one of those people that doesn't have somebody around them that can reflect back in a loving way, then it would be good to find a professional, a life coach or a counselor or a psychiatrist or somebody who's been trained to do that, because that's the practice. You need to have someone who can model it in order to own it yourself,
Mm.
right? And that's really key. And I think oftentimes as leaders, it goes back to that belief that we have that we're supposed to, should have already mastered everything.
That's right. There's your acronym of shame.
Shame. Should have already mastered everything. Stephanie has that beautiful
Mm.
acronym, and I think that it follows us around as leaders. And it's so important, especially at this point in the year, at the beginning of the year, when we're beating ourselves up over not yet accomplishing what we said we were going to accomplish. And it's only the third or fourth week. And it's like, gosh,
We're so hard on ourselves.
loving kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Make That's what makes space to change and to the things you want to accomplish. You need space in order to do it. And this is the inner work that'll get you there.
Exactly. I was going to say, and the space isn't outside of yourself. You can have all the space in the outer world, but if you do not have the space inside, it doesn't matter how much you've been given in the outer world. It doesn't matter how much someone loves you and cares for you and is there for you. You'll probably push them away.
Mm.
And it's like, so to be able to make the space inside is to really do it with love. When we love ourselves, and that it's like, we might say, well, I love myself. Yeah, I look in the mirror, I look great. Yeah, I love myself. That's not love. Being to love yourself is to see those parts within yourself, like how you think, how you speak to yourself, how you show up to yourself, the lack of forgiveness, the inquiry, like who am I? Why am I here? These are all practices of self-love. And until we start to do those things, that's actually what creates a space for us to then look even deeper.
Mm.
And we get what we need so that we can become who we're meant to become. I always hear that saying, it's like you only get what you can handle. And I think it really is. You get what you are ready for so that you can grow and evolve and become someone who is better and not bitter. And that is a practice. And that does take not just a practice, but also to have a community of people around you that can support you with love and kindness until you can step into it on your own. It takes time,
Yeah.
gentleness.
So our wish for you as we continue on this 2024 journey together is that you continue with kindness and love for yourself and for your teams and for your families and all the people around you. Thank you for joining us on the Soulful Leader podcast. You can find us on LinkedIn and on Facebook and right here next week on the Soulful Leader podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stepanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.